Let's get into a bit of a market update today. Of course, we'll be breaking down the future of Bitcoin and the political landscape as it all pertains to crypto. You guys are going to love it. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, and that is iTrust Capital. If you think about long-term holding and you want to do it in a tax-exempt way, you can actually go into a crypto IRA. The way to do that is visit itrustcapital.com. You can start or even transfer your current IRA over into a crypto IRA. Lots of options here. Of course, you can buy, sell crypto within the account, self-directed. That, of course, has a small fee, but there's no monthly fees for you to actually maintain an account there. All you have to do is use our link down below. It's going to give you a $100 funding reward. Once that you sign up and you decide it's for you, check it out. This is a great way to look at long-term wealth without having to expose yourself into a tax situation. Always, of course, consult your own tax and legal professionals out there as you get these things started. Start with this first headline: Bitcoin ETFs cool as crypto funds post their biggest loss since March. This is, of course, saying that they shedded $621 million worth of assets. There's a couple of points within this. The Fed Reserve's hawkish stance last week when we looked at the FOMC lowered institutional investors' confidence as the market outflows across all crypto exchange traded products, ETPs, last week stood at about 600 million. And you look at that along with a couple other items here. Investors appear to have lost confidence because of the dot plot. This is in reference to the potential for a rate cut. Now the dot plot indicates that the Fed may anticipate only one rate cut in 2024. A lot of people still looking for two, even though I think right now it's slated one. That's my prediction, is that we're going to probably hold out at one. Bitcoin ETFs in particular saw net outflows of 621 million. So definitely a different time. And I think this is part of what we've seen with Bitcoin starting to plummet down to around 65K. Of course, do we see that go further? We'll take a look at the charts and go into that a little bit more today. 66K Bitcoin price now is in critical. 5 things to know this week. Couple of points within this article I thought were interesting. Traders and analysts are now considering what is the immediate future has in store and whether bulls or bears are in control. The biggest and largest cryptocurrency shedding almost 5% after briefly dipping down under 65K. So this is the point I think that everybody's looking at right now. Can Bitcoin start to move into that 62K? Evan and I were on last week. He's looking at the potential of a sub 60. I'd love to get you guys' input. Let me know down in the comments. Make sure and smash the like button, because it's one of the ways we get feedback from our audience and really understanding what you guys are interested in looking at here on the show. A couple of points here from Kyle Chassé. I think people are a bit bored. Biggest mistakes are made. I would agree with that. A lot of cycles aren't always action packed, and that's kind of the sideways action that we've kind of moved into. He says he's guaranteed that smart money and institutions will keep loading up. 99% of people will get shaken out, which is typical. These are the typical things. Are you in it for a longer haul? And in many cases, people might look at this and not even think about this as a cycle, but as simply a step in the direction of multi-cycle investment strategies going forward. So all of that pointing into a very interesting market as we go into an election. I'll get into some of that here in a second. I do want to go to a clip real quick. This clip will get into a little bit more around whether or not this bull run is over. Take a look.
The NASDAQ has been unbelievable, and so is the S&P.
Yeah.
After, Bitcoin's is going to have trouble going higher if there's only one cut. It's been wanting, obviously that's why people buy, because they think the Fed's going to go hog wild again. But why is it diverging from the NASDAQ? Why is Bitcoin
this is interesting. I know it. I wrote it up this morning,
in
fact. Yeah, so we've been watching Bitcoin because the correlation to the NASDAQ 100 has been increasing back to levels that we haven't seen since 21. And to me, that's interesting. It does show that now investors are treating things as a risk asset broadly, right, including Bitcoin, including equities. So when we see Bitcoin pulling back in that framework and the NASDAQ 100 just forging higher, that concerns us to some degree. Just short term, we still believe in this bull market cycle for both Bitcoin and equities. But we do sense that divergence is something that will ultimately probably catch up with the NASDAQ 100 index as soon as people say, well, wait a second, NVIDIA's maybe a little bit overstretched here.
All right, so many people kind of considering what's happening in the NASDAQ 100. If you really think about it, it should be the NASDAQ 1, which is really NVIDIA. running the market right now, and as goes Nvidia, typically the rest of the market. So I think all of this really boils down to a couple of things: macro scenarios that are going to be taking place from a global perspective, and then also I think the scenario from a political landscape really starts to move forward with maybe a new pressure cooker coming out of the regulation side of it. Then you have the Ethereum scenario that plays into this. Here's Eric Balchunas. He's talking about they're updating. We're moving their over-under data for the launch of the spot ETF now to July 2nd. So this might be good. I'm kind of zoom in on that tweet right there. Hearing that staff sent issuers comments on the S1s today, and they're pretty tight or pretty light, nothing major, asking them back in a week. So if that happens, early July could be the date for a potential ETF to actually start going live. And when that happens, I feel like we're going to see some pretty, I think, initial moves around both Bitcoin and Ethereum as we start to see the appetite of investors for other assets in the digital category outside Bitcoin. This tweet, or I want to go to another clip, actually. This is Richard Teng. He's talking a little bit more about this cycle and why it's unique. Take a look.
My price for end of this year is much higher than 80,000. I'm not going to give you the price, but it's much higher than my base price end of last year. And I think next year will be a much better year compared to this year. Something that's pretty unique in this cycle, if you remember the past cycle, right? Normally it start off with Bitcoin rallying, and then it filter down to the other mega coins, so to say. And then slowly it goes down to the meme coins. This cycle sort of was focused on Bitcoin and then meme coins, skipping a lot of
straight to the end.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is unique in this particular cycle is unique in that sense as well, which is something that I don't think we have quite seen in previous cycle. Right? I do think that the market cap will more than easily double. How many more times than that? 3 times, 4 times. It's very difficult to have a crystal ball to predict that. It will easily more than double from where we are.
I'm just doing the math, and I'm hearing a range of between maybe 6 and 12 trillion there, David. What do you think of that? It's pretty bullish.
All right, so when you look at what they're talking about is the overall market cap in general of crypto holding in around 3 trillion. So you think that capacity, remember that was Mr. Teng coming in, he's the new CEO at Binance. Obviously, he has a little bit of a dog in that hunt. He's kind of pitching his own book because obviously Binance wins big if all crypto goes up, as do most of the exchanges in terms of just volume and activity. But the other thing that plays into this is how, assets under management are reacting to this. So here's BlackRock and Fidelity now owning about 477,000 Bitcoin. Kind of zoom in on that right there. Worth $31 billion for their spot Bitcoin ETFs. These ETFs hold 260,000 plus more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy, which has been at it for a few years now and pretty much been the one to kind of look at as the bellwether of the industry. So that being the face of where Bitcoin is going, when you look at the ETFs, remember, it's not just BlackRock. It's not really them in control of it, even though they have certain funds that can control certain things, but it's mostly the accompanying funds that provide that assets under management for those kinds of directions in terms of acquiring these. That tells me there's a lot more interest from Wall Street in general, and I think that starts to point to bigger potential in terms of market cap. Also, you have to look at the international effect, and of course, international breaking. Australia is now largest stock exchange. ASX has now approved its first spot Bitcoin ETF. So we'll see how that plays out. Australia, a very active market. In fact, I think it's number 3 right now behind the UK and the US in terms of active investors. Still one of the largest markets out there. It'll be interesting to see how Australia works in terms of appetite for assets under management, much like what's happened here with BlackRock, or will it be more retail? That'll be the kind of curious scenario that will play out over the next few months. Further in, of course, we get into the political landscape, and you got Donald Trump saying he's going to end Joe Biden's war on crypto and ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in America. Kind of interesting to see the amazing pivot by our political candidates outside of RFK, because he's pretty much been pro-Bitcoin all along. But for Trump, this is pretty much a move into the crypto camp that has been a little bit different, because he's always been very pro-dollar. Not that he isn't pro-dollar, but the fact that he's looking at this as an innovation hub is a big step in the right direction. But that's not all. There's a lot more happening on the political front. I want to go to a clip here. And this will get into a little bit more around what else could be happening, especially in Biden's camp. This is Anthony Scaramucci talking a little bit more about this. Take a look.
I don't know why he's decided to seed all these young people on cryptocurrency legislation by vetoing the cryptocurrency legislation. I don't
think I think you and I can agree. Trump doesn't know what crypto is. He doesn't care what it is, but you're right. He's got a feral sense. He's got animal cunning when he spots an issue that can divide up. And I was talking earlier today to Ro Khanna, and he's congressman from Silicon Valley. He's like, 25% of these people out there, when they talk about blockchain and crypto, and it sounds like Biden is going to shut it down and Trump is going to just be Trump and like say yes, they're going to be like, I'm out. Just reflexive hatred of it is.
Yeah, but
I hate the scammers in the deal. I hate the Ponzi guys in the deal.
Me too.
And they exist in every space. They exist in home mortgages, for God's sakes.
Rick, they've hurt me. Rick, they've hurt me. Yeah. Trust me. I agree with you. I'm just saying, I want to win the election.
All right, so this was Scaramucci with the Lincoln Project. Remember, the Lincoln Project very tied in to just not getting Trump. They're Republicans, but they're just not getting Trump into the White House. I'll explain more about this because this flows into a much bigger political landscape scenario. And I will say this about most politicians is that the ones that I've talked to, not all, but for most, I mean, we have a handful that do understand what's happening within the crypto space. They definitely understand blockchain to a certain extent, but it's a very small minority, compared to what we have seen. Now, granted, could we expect guys like Trump and even others, including Joe Biden, to really understand what this might mean for the United States? I think they're only relying on their staffers to really understand where that's going. So I would argue against that, that Trump doesn't know. It's just that, they don't need to know that much. What they need to know is that there's an innovation opportunity. But you got to look at the political baggage that plays around this. Here's Gary Gensler, could literally cost Joe Biden the election. This is coming in from Mark Cuban. And I'll play out within this because Cuban kind of hit on a couple of points here because he was doing this whole State of Crypto event. And this is where he kind of dropped in on this. And this is a very uniquely American issue. And I would agree that this is more of a Gensler problem right now from an SEC standpoint because it does look like there's a lot of overreach around innovation in most of this. But this is an opportunity as well, I think, for both sides to kind of play hero here. And I think that's the question going forward is how fast and how quickly could we see the Biden administration jump to maybe a neutral, if not a pro stance on crypto. Here, of course, is leaked email showing that Biden's administration will be attending a Bitcoin and crypto roundtable in DC. This is next month in July. Now, this is still potentially a rumor, but it does show potential faith here. This, of course, is talking about things like former House Speaker Paul Ryan calls on the U.S. to fight China with stablecoins. So this gets into more democratic position, especially when you look at trying to kind of understand not only the innovation opportunity, but what we're losing on a global standpoint. I think that's a bigger point going forward. Back to the Lincoln Project, because this is exactly who they are. So this is kind of the lineup of how they got started. This, of course, is all kind of joined or came about during the last election with Donald Trump. And most of it was just trying to do anything to get an elected official in there outside a president, outside of Donald Trump, even though they were, Republicans, because they are Republican Party members. So the fact that they're moving in this direction could start to lure in that bipartisan landscape around the Democrats and Republicans maybe coming together on this as a whole. Just to give you an example, on our crypto tracker, you guys can jump over to our website. This is our political tracker. We update it daily right now, Monday through Friday. And this is the interesting point right here, is that Biden has actually been climbing in sentiment on crypto all the way back since the beginning of June, almost the end of June, as almost in a position where he's starting to compete with RFK in terms of positive sentiment. Now, this could be just RFK falling off the chart in terms of sentiment as a potential candidate. That's still not necessarily be the case, but Trump has been kind of somewhat flatlining here, but is still slightly climbing on sentiment overall. With that being said, a couple of other things you have to look at. Here's of course, Jeremy Allaire, the Circle executive, saying that Euro stablecoins will boom after MiCA goes live. Guess what? That happens in a couple of weeks. When this occurs, we are going to see, I think, a land grab within the European Union around crypto, but especially around stablecoins. And this may start to shift the percentage of what we'll see in terms of stablecoins versus fiat the rest of this year. That'll be a very intriguing thing to watch. We're going to try to get Patrick Hansen on to talk about this very soon. Other things out here, Coinbase decided to bring the controversial pre-launch markets. This is another thing that many people would look at. Because we are Americans, we can't get into these pre-launch markets. And it means that, you and I, a Coinbase account holder, cannot go into these kind of projects. And it opens this up to the rest of the world, or at least the regions and jurisdictions that Coinbase operates in. What does this mean as a strategy for Coinbase? It means that maybe their projects may not necessarily get the bump that Coinbase usually gives on that. So that's something to consider. It also looks a little bit bad from an optic standpoint for Coinbase because it means Americans can't do it. And we're the biggest market out there in terms of crypto assets, stablecoins, et cetera, out behind the UK and Australia. Now, they could be looking at this as a more cumulative effect around the global scenario that plays out within this, and it's just a strategy move overall. Other things that are happening, of course, with that being the case, you've got Tether debuting its new synthetic dollar backed by tokenized gold in another tokenized push. So this will be another big barrier that will continue to push Tether maybe to the top of the heap to compete with USDC, as we see the USDC and the USDE, the euro, starting to take maybe center stage around stablecoins. And that'll be the question, is how much stablecoins start to move into some of these other major liquid areas. So all of that kind of pointing into a couple other things. And one of the things it points to, of course, is this right here. U.S.-Saudi petrodollar deal now is ending after 50 years. Petrodollar basically simply means that when Saudi was selling the U.S. oil, they would settle in the American dollar. That, of course, has started to move away. Some of that could be pressure from BRICS. I think it's more in the sense that we've got so many different global currencies now that are rising, and that Saudi is simply in a position where they're trying to beat global trade and really understand that. We could see stablecoins start to play into this, tokenized gold play into this, whether it's the digital yuan or possibly even Russian assets going into this. All of this plays into one other scenario, and that is a bit of a weakening in terms of the fiat condition from a U.S. standpoint. All right, so I want to go to a clip here. This is the CEO of Abra talking a little bit more around how these assets may play out in a global financial condition. Let me kind of just
really save the problem. So let's go back to the overall picture here. So we've got Bitcoin as the shadow central bank, or the central bank asset. Yeah. The next forecast is that you have Ethereum as the primary blockchain for institutions, and that we're going to see the traditional financial system move on chain through this process of tokenization. Break that down.
Sure. So the beauty of digital currencies is that once you're operating outside of a traditional database and using like a token that you can move around just peer-to-peer, it doesn't have to reside in your computer anymore, the transaction. It could be everywhere. But that almost necessitates a new banking system that's not based upon the mainframes that we still use to process ATM withdrawals, right? Those were built in the 1970s before the internet existed. We need a banking system and a financial system that works at internet scale. So derivative transactions, institutional lending, how are we going to do that using tokenized stocks or Bitcoin as collateral for a loan? Well, DeFi and all of the different kind of decentralized applications that have been built on this new kind of crypto smart contract stack take advantage of all of this. Always on, meaning 24/7, 365, always on, right? No borders. Sometimes we artificially put borders into these systems because we're afraid of being sued, right? Even if we think we're right. So we'll put IP checks for country checks or whatever to block the US usually, right? But basically it's borderless, always on, operates 24/7, and is infinitely, more scalable than monolithic systems that each investment bank has had to build on their own over the years.
All right, so as you can see, his framework is that there is going to be 3 blockchains that kind of really benefit from this. Obviously, the Ethereum blockchain from the tokenized side of things. He didn't mention it, but in the interview, he broke down a little bit more around Solana, and that being the retail potential. Now, it doesn't mean that Solana is the automatic winner. There could be others that will play into this in terms of transaction. I think that real-world assets will also be another factor, whether we say something like an Avalanche or so, playing into that game. But the point is that it is a revitalization of an entire financial ecosystem. That might be why you're starting to see so much political front upon this, as well as what we're seeing from a global macro side of things, whether it's MiCA, the Saudi Petrodollar, BRICS, all of these things are happening somewhat at the same time. And that is as the dollar starts to see a little bit of a downtrend. Last up, of course, is T-Mobile, now owner of Deutsche Telekom, will soon mine Bitcoin in addition to running nodes. So this, again, just shows more global macro positioning by some of the biggest companies out there, starting to understand maybe the future of where blockchain is going to go. Just a quick look here on Bitcoin, starting to come up slightly at the 66K mark after plummeting to around 65K over the weekend, and kind of in a position right now. ETH starting to stabilize slightly, coming back into a position here after seeing a $3,400, now positioning into almost 35.50, back into our sentiment zone that we've been tracking. We'll continue to lay this down. By the way, if you guys are not part of the Diamond Circle, make sure and get in on that right now. It's a great place to get additional content. We have an airdrop going over there for all members, so all you have to do is be a member and be eligible for that. Check it out. It's on the homepage. If you're not following me on X, do that. It's just @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.